Crawford's study is online. If you want to find it, it's on the committee that had the hearing. If you want to kind of peruse it, learn more about mandates. She always did a really clear job of trying to get her bills passed on the floor and explaining what they were as well. But exemptions aren't mandates. Mandates are the cost of doing business, friends. The cost of doing business. So I want to have teachers expand what they do. It's going to require them to each have an extra hour of work per week. That has a real cost involved to it. If they can do it in-house without a cost, that's good too. And that's what we do now anyway. And if you listen to my introduction, I was really clear that the purpose of this bill isn't just to stop unfunded, underfunded mandates to political subdivision, but it's going to help us make sound, and I'm saying this verbatim again, it's an opportunity to review our existing programs to help us make sound financial decisions on the cost-benefit ratio of existing programs. And it's going to help those who come after us to create well-thought-out and necessary policies with the complete financial backing of the legislature. They're not going to do this on an island. And then one of the concerns I had, and I didn't write down who said it, and I apologize for this, is that what if this goes on and there's no cutoff? Well, I'm pretty sure we have something called a sunset clause. If we're concerned about something, we would put a sunset on it. If we have an existing program that we want to find a way to fund, we have our tools in the toolbox for a lot of the concerns that you're worried about. And if Senator Albright is concerned about certain political subdivisions, and frankly, I think we're all friends, but I know there's concerns from some districts for certain subdivisions, then let's pick the ones that we're really concerned about, which are our counties, municipalities, and our schools. Let's clarify. If you're worried that somebody will be a ne'er-do-well and you have evidence that they've been a ne'er-do-well, let's leave them out of it. Because at least we've started doing something. At least we've decided to take this 20 plus years of data, this 20 plus years of people begging for us to do something, and actually done something with it. And I'm always puzzled when someone says, I can't do this because I can't do this to taxpayers. Do what? Save money? We push forward tax bills that have no sustainability, and we don't blink twice. I don't get involved a lot with the things that pertain to taxes. And the reason I don't is because I need things in my head to make sense and to be simple. And I, as Senator Hilgers brought to your attention, have been talking about unfunded mandates since I got elected. And the reason I do is because I live in the fastest growing county in Nebraska. This is a burden on our growth. And as long as we are a Dillon's Rule state, unless you want to take that to the Constitution, to the public to vote on, there aren't a lot of options for our counties. There aren't a lot of options for our schools. And I'm really puzzled by all of this.
1 minute.
I want to do what I think is right for Nebraska taxpayers, which is to build a strong foundation for us to make better policy decisions in the future and in the now. We can't do anything about the past unless we choose to bring it forward at a later date, but we can do something about the future. We know there's another recession coming. We know that. We know Nebraska is going to be in a bunch of trouble because we have a drought coming. We know what's going on across the seas in Russia. And so we're going to have trouble with fertilizer and fuel. If we want to get our act together, we've got to do something bold. And this is how we do it. And we do it with voter support. And if the voters think it's a bad idea, guess what? It won't get passed. And that's okay too. But at least we pulled the trigger once and for all the tens of thousands of dollars we've spent on this research. What a waste of taxpayer dollars to never pull the trigger. And all the past ways that people tried to pull the trigger were met with dissension and were met
Senator.
with no's.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, study resolutions 37172, Senator Williams, Walls 373, 74, Lathrop 75, Matt Hansen 76, 77, Day 78, and 79, and 80, all study resolutions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Returning to debate, Senator Morfeld, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LR 263CA, and I appreciate Senator Blood bringing this proposed constitutional amendment because, quite frankly, this is something that we've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years and likely before that, but particularly in the last 20 or 30 years, which is really shoving the cost of doing business with state government down to the counties. And it's had a really negative impact on those counties in the sense that they now shoulder that burden and they have to then increase property taxes and other types of taxes and defend that. And so to me, this is holding the legislature accountable for our actions and these new mandates that we are constantly pushing back down to the county or completely unfunding in general. So I rise in support of the proposed constitutional amendment. I also want to say that I've talked to Senator Blood, I've talked to Senator Hilgers about some of his concerns in terms of tightening up some of the language and providing clarifying language as well. And I remain committed to working with Senator Blood and Senator Hilgers between now and select to work on that language. And both have told me that they'll work with me. You know, just to talk a little bit about statutory interpretation, in this case, constitutional interpretation, because this would be a constitutional amendment. Statutory interpretation really begins with the text, and the text is to be given its plain and ordinary meaning. And oftentimes what we do on that is we review that language to ascertain the meaning of those words. And if they're not plain, direct, and unambiguous, then what we do is we start interpreting what is the intent of the introducer and the people that supported it. And then we also go to the dictionary. And if you pull up the Black's Law Dictionary, because responsibility was kind of a pain point, I think, in line 14 on page 1 there. If you look at responsibility or the definition of it, it's the quality, state, or condition of being answerable or accountable. And then a synonym for that is liability. Well, if you go to Black's Law Dictionary and you look at then liability, the definition of liability is the quality, state, or condition of being legally obligated or accountable, legal responsibility to another or to society enforceable by civil remedy or criminal punishment. So in this context, in this case, the quality, state, or condition of being legally obligated or accountable. So if we are imposing an obligation that is legal in nature, which any statute would, that is legal in nature for the county to do something new, then therefore the state would be legally obligated to pay for that and to have an appropriation. So I think some of the terms, yes, maybe need to be defined. Some of this needs to be made a little bit more precise in terms of what we're talking about and defining what a new program is. I think that's language that also needs to be addressed. I think in general, the courts will interpret this using the plain meaning of those words. And I think that if you read the Black's Law Dictionary of responsibility, you look at the cited synonym of that, liability, I think it becomes fairly clear on that part. Now, what we need to tighten up, I think, is what constitutes a new program. So bailiffs have been around for a long time. I'm assuming it's been in statute since the 1800s. I haven't done legal research on that yet. But adding a new bailiff, to me, doesn't mean that that's a new program. That's an existing program. You're just adding a new person. But those are the types of things that need to be tightened up and cleaned up between now and select file. I also think, some language that was suggested by some folks is line 16, adding as the legislature may determine. So that would give a little bit more flexibility to the legislature and to this body to be able to determine that. Now, the danger of that sometimes is we give the legislature more flexibility. There's more ways around the intent of the proposed constitutional amendment. So all that being said, I think that what I've heard on the floor is that people think that this is an important issue and policy to advance to select file. I think that there's a few of us that need to work on tightening up the language and providing clarifying language, and I'm committed to doing that with Senator Hilgers and Senator Blood, and I urge you to support it on general file. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Morfeld. Senator Matt Hansen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. Colleagues, I do rise in support of LR 263CA. Has been kind of mentioned before, we've looked at this kind of issue of unfunded mandates a number of times throughout our term in the throughout my tenure in the legislature, and had a variety of different roadblocks from actually resolving that. Some obviously, kind of short-term fiscal situation of the state, the inability to provide more money at those circumstances, and others kind of more philosophical or broad issues in terms of what we should do, or what is the role specifically between the counties and the state, in terms of the counties being kind of creations of the state designed to largely implement state policy, which I think singles them out in a different way than, say, a home rule city or school board or some of the other political subdivisions that we have. And one of the reasons that I wanted to support this and move forward with it is I do think we kind of need to have this bigger, broader conversation on what are we going to do. I think some of the practical matters that are brought up are worth reflecting upon. For example, the concern that a fiscal note won't be accurate or might be inflated in terms of trying to derail policy or derail legislation. Colleagues, I agree that's a potential concern, but I would like to point out that's a potential concern and problem now. And we do routinely see fiscal notes that I think many of us question their sincerity and see that as a way, especially in a way in down fiscal years, because kind of under our own rules, we have to respect fiscal notes, which at least while a county or school board or city putting a fiscal note on a bill doesn't necessarily kill it, a state department does. So I understand the concern that a county being able to put a fiscal note on a bill might kill it in a tough budget year, but that's something we have already as a body conceded to state departments. I don't think rightfully so. I think that's something we should look at, but I'm willing to say that, hey, if a state department fiscal note kind of gets looked at as, and I understand fiscal office does their review and their critique of it, but if a state fiscal note from a state department starts off as presumed to be valid and presumed to be significant, we probably owe that to our political subdivisions too, especially when assigning them duties. The other thing that I want to note about is, these different unfunded mandates kind of hit different counties differently for a variety of reasons, but we've seen this, and I think I've been privy to serve on the government committee during some of the interim studies that have been referenced and seen some of the materials and some of the previous proposed bills. But we see counties that have a lot of the state institutions or state government roles have disproportionate impacts. For example, Lancaster County, but in addition to obviously having the state capital, a lot of administrative offices, also has a significant portion of the state correctional facilities between the state pen, D&E, Community Corrections Lincoln. And we see that as an opportunity where there are some things that are just charged to the county for the sheer fact that they have a correctional institution in their county. And that's the same across the state with all the different facilities. And that's something that, again, only probably hits, don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but probably only hits 5 or 6 counties. But it hits those counties very differently than counties that don't have a facility. And I know there's some philosophy and sort of trade-off in that's a job driver, it's an economic driver in terms of being an employer, and maybe there's some trade-offs there, but it is still kind of an unfunded requirement for the counties to supervise. Again, we also see that with some of the difficulties, and I believe this is one that's come up throughout time.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Has been the reference of the state taking over some of the county's Medicaid responsibilities, but then the county continuing to pay for office space. And that's an issue that I know we've seen in Lancaster County, where the county is beholden to whatever office space the state chooses, essentially, which in the past has been kind of some nice downtown space and maybe isn't the most cost effective for their needs. But the county doesn't have a say. And because of this state law, wherever office space, DHHS signs a lease in Lancaster County, we have the obligation of, including, I think there's some difficulties where, as we've consolidated things at DHHS, the Lancaster County office becoming a more regional office. And so there's some more regional efforts being subsidized by Lancaster County, kind of at the sheer choice of what lease DHHS wants. This is obviously something this bill is not going to solve because that's an existing program, an existing statute, but that's kind of the idea of what we need to get at and probably need to prevent in the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Panzine Brooks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in full support of LR 263CA by Senator Blood. You know, all the people that have been complaining to us about property taxes from day one since I've been in here, this is a way to help solve that, Nebraskans. You know, the root cause of property taxes are, and why they're so high, is because of the high cost of the state mandates and all the state mandates that we've passed on to the counties. So, you know, people have been standing up and saying the language isn't exactly correct, it needs to be tightened. That's fine. All that language can be tightened. That's not a problem. I want to read a letter from Don Kelly, who's the chair of the Sarpy County Board of Commissioners. He said, "Good afternoon, Chairman Brewer." This was on January 28th, and members of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. My name is Don Kelly, and I am chairman of the Sarpy County Board of Commissioners. I want to thank Senator Carol Blood for introducing LR 263CA. Sarpy County appreciates her longstanding support and her long-term commitment to supporting the elimination of unfunded and underfunded mandates to counties. Over several years, we have watched many well-meaning legislative proposals directing local governments to implement and ultimately pay for in the long term. Over the past few legislative sessions, we have seen more and more bills that limit local government's funding and therefore limit the ability to pay for the current programs, which are in most cases operating on skinny budgets. We support measures that would fully fund programs our county would be responsible for operating and maintaining. LR 263CA would certainly give teeth to any legislative measures passed by the legislature, which are sure to be created after 2022. As an elected official who must manage a budget, I understand some concerns that may limit your financial flexibility. However, I would suggest that you already have financial limits with your requirement to stay within a balanced budget. I believe LR 263CA, if passed by the voters, would benefit the legislature by adding reasonable language to pay for the services and programs any legislature would pursue in the future. In closing, I handed out a short list of long-term expenses on state programs, which are long-term unfunded mandates, for your review, and which we have discussed over the years and will continue to educate legislators in the coming years. Thank you for your service and opportunity to visit with you today. So that was from Sarpy County Commissioner Don Kelly. And Senator Blood handed out the list. I'm looking at Lancaster and Sarpy. Sarpy has office space costs of $103,000, for the district court's office space costs for the county courts of $68,000. Lancaster is $506,000. As far as probation, it's $294,000 for Sarpy County. For Lancaster County, it's $393,000. I mean, the costs are extensive, and we do continue to pass bills that cost these counties way too much. And if they're costing the counties, guess how they're paying for them? It isn't a secret. It's through property taxes. So again, everyone comes to us to say lower the property taxes. Well, this allows us to help the counties lower property taxes. This is a great idea by Senator Blood. We can take it to the people. And if the people
1 minute.
do not want to pass this constitutional amendment, then we'll know. But I don't know what people are afraid of to take this to the people. I don't know what the legislators in here are afraid of about taking it to the people. We're going to have to come together and figure out the best way to help property taxes. And this is clearly one significant major way to do so. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pansing Brooks. Senator Mosier, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, as having been in government for 16 years, I understand unfunded mandates. We've sure had our share at the city. But these mandates trickle down to the state from the federal government, and the federal government's not going to pay for every mandate they come up with. So for the state to assume that responsibility, I think could get really, really expensive. You know, imagine they have some new energy policy. Maybe they don't want any carbon fuel used in generating electricity. And so they pass a law that all states have to come up with a carbon-free power policy. And then the power districts would have to correspond and get rid of all carbon-generated electricity. And then they would send the bill to the state, and the state would have to pay for it. Now, some might think that's a good thing, having carbon-free electricity, but I'm just using that as an example of how this thing could go. And we would have no control over how the power districts implemented that plan. And as long as the state's going to pay for it, they wouldn't really have any motivation to do it in any way that necessarily saves the state money. They're going to do it in the way that accomplishes the goal that they want to accomplish. I think that the theory that unfunded mandates are painful and they shouldn't occur, I can agree with that in theory, but in the implementation, I can see so many problems that, you know, I just don't think that we anticipate at this point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. Senator Ben Hansen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. A little torn on this bill here because I think there's a lot of moving parts to this bill, and I appreciate especially a lot of the discussion that we're having here and asking a lot of questions, and I appreciate Senator Blood for answering these questions because this bill does have a lot of moving parts. Some of it might be unintended consequences we don't realize, and so I'm hoping some of these questions will kind of flesh some of those out a little bit. But I'm a little torn because this does, like what Senator Moorfield was saying earlier, that this does actually make us have to justify any bill that we have to pass that's going to impose a mandate on a county because now we have to pay for it. And so I think then that makes it more difficult for us as a legislature to pass laws that might negatively affect counties. But I did have a couple questions for Senator Blood, if she'd be willing to yield, please.
Senator Blood, would you yield?
Yes, I would be happy to yield.
So you mentioned earlier that this bill is intended for any mandate moving forward from this point on, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. What happens if we have like a cleanup bill to a law that's a mandate that changes like one word? When that changes the law, would we have to now pay for that mandate?
No, because that would still be a past mandate. You're not changing the mandate, you're just changing language in the mandate. Unless you were to expand the mandate, and then that would be a new mandate.
Okay, all right. And some of these questions I think that Speaker Hildreth had as well. Who determines the fiscal note? And you kind of mentioned that a little bit.
The fiscal office,
Okay.
as it does now.
Okay, so we impose a mandate onto a county. The fiscal office then determines how much it's going to cost the county, not the county.
Right. Well, actually, if you read your fiscal notes, you'll notice that the fiscal office actually reaches out to that particular county. They'll reach out to all the counties in NACO and say, this is the bill we're considering. If we were to impose this mandate, what would be the cost to your county?
Okay, and it would typically always be the fiscal office fiscal note that we use.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I can't hear you.
Because sometimes when you get a fiscal note, we get them from different sources that have different numbers sometimes. And so which one would we take?
Well, which one do we take now, Senator?
It depends because we just don't really take either one. They're just giving us their opinions. Like with the fiscal office, we'd probably generally take what they say versus some other kind of entity.
I mean, we have the option, just like we do now. For instance, both Senator Linehan and I have had fiscal notes that were like outrageous, and it was clear that there was a misunderstanding from the fiscal office, who does a great job. But there was a misunderstanding, and then you say, we think there's a misunderstanding on this fiscal note. We need you to correct this, and this is why we think we had this misunderstanding. So we have the ability now, should we question, to change it, and
Okay.
that doesn't change with this bill.
Okay, well, I appreciate you answering that. That helps. Do you have any concern that this could potentially be abused by political subdivisions?
Could you give me an example?
Well, for instance, like all of a sudden a school says now because we passed constitutional carry that we have to now increase our security in our building by $5 million. And then because that's a mandate that we have not really put on them, but because the unintended consequence of a bill that we pass, then they would have to, we'd have to foot the bill for something like that. As an example, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but
Well, I think any bill we have usually implements what the policy is and how that policy goes into place. So unless we were asking them to add $500,000 in security within the legislation, I find that nearly impossible that something like that could happen. It can't happen now any more than it could happen then.
okay. Would you, I know Senator Hilgers, Speaker Hilgers also talked about maybe working on this between now and Select File, and I'm kind of in line with what he's saying too. I might
1 minute.
possibly be a green vote on this. Would you be opposed to maybe putting a cap or limiting the amount the state funds can mandate, or matching requirement maybe?
Actually, Senator Hansen, when I'm next in the queue or someone yields me some time, I'm actually going to address that.
Okay, all right, cool. Or if this gets passed, then the counties would be forced to lower the levy based on the amount of funding that they get from the state? So Senator Pansy Brooks brought this up too. She's like, this will help lower property taxes, but how do we guarantee that?
Well, we guarantee this for several reasons, because we're going to be more fiscally responsible as a body, because now we're really going to have to think about how much money we spend, for starters. Because right now, when we can't figure out how to pay for something, we pass it down to the counties, to the schools, to the municipalities, and other political subdivisions. And we've done that for a very long time, Senator Hansen.
Yep, and that makes sense, and I agree with that. But then now, if we start paying for things for political subdivisions or for the counties, then I would hope, or I would expect them to say, "Look, we don't need as much money now, so we are actually going to lower our levy, or lower the amount of tax burden that we're putting on the people through property taxes."
Time,
But,
Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hansen and Senator Blood. Senator DeBoer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to yield my time to Senator Blood.
Senator Blood yielded 454.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer, and thank you, Mr. President. And to answer that question, that is exactly the point, Senator Hansen, is to give our local subdivisions the ability to lower local property taxes. I look at a county like Sarpy County, who is very fiscally responsible, and the amazing things that they have done with our budget without raising taxes, including the brand new jail that we are building. And I believe the voters of Sarpy County have made good decisions on who they put on that board. And so that is exactly what should happen from this. And so in response to some of the concerns, I want to propose some of the language. If we did a definition of unfunded mandate and made it part of this legislative resolution, we could say, as determined by the legislature or outside lid and levy limits, as the legislature may determine, or as determined outside the lid on restricted funds and levy limits. We have the ability to change the language quite easily. And I know for a fact that our friends that are out in the rotunda, and I didn't know there were going to be so many friends, but good on them, are willing to work on the language. Because a lot of our counties, especially our smaller counties, are at a breaking point. And for some reason, even though we're a Dillon's Rule state and we know that they can't spend any money or do anything really unless we put it in state statute. And I don't understand why we're not more concerned with them except to try and cap them all the time. We like to point the finger and say they're responsible for why people's property taxes are high. Look at the schools, look at the counties. But what are we doing about it on the state level? And friends, you know, when I talk to some of you about the past research that's been done, when I was researching to become a senator, that was one of the first things I did, was look historically at what the state legislature has done. Some good and some not so good. And we know that this stuff is public information. And I know Senator Sue Crawford, who is probably the most diligent senator I have ever met since I have been here, and from when I was on the city council and worked with state senators. And she brought forward an excellent case that was well researched, that was well presented. And where did it go? Nowhere. It went nowhere. So we can stand here today and say, why isn't this a bill? Well, that's why it's not a bill. We can stand here and we can say, why do we have to make this constitutional? Because that's really our only option left. But if we stand here and say, I'm not going to support it, period, because I don't like a certain political subdivision or I'm not okay with the language, I think back to all the times that we've negotiated and I've supported changes in language from general to select. It's a small tweak in the language to appease the concerns that you have. A small tweak. And then what do we get from this? The people's voices get to be heard. They get to decide this in the voting booth. And if they don't like it, guess what's going to happen? It's not going to pass. And maybe there's a special interest group that doesn't want it to pass, and you know they'll pump millions of dollars into it anyway. So, where's the fear? What's the concern? If they vote it forward, we're going to make sure that we're protecting our coffers. We have to protect
1
our
minute.
coffers. And we don't always have to do that through fancy legislation. We can do this by building a strong foundation where we have the expectation that people don't spend money unless they have it or they can prove that they can get it. That's what we had to do our first 2 years in the legislature when I came on, because there was no money. And we took that seriously, and we didn't pass a bill unless we could show how we could pay for it. Now we've kind of gotten off track because we've got this big old piggy bank this time. But it's not always going to be that way, friends. And so if you have doubts, talk to me about those doubts. But if you vote against it just to vote against it, that's really just a shame. Because I really feel that this is for the betterment of all, for the betterment of the future, and what's best for Nebraska citizens. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Blood, you are next in the queue. This is your last opportunity, but you will have an opportunity to close. You are recognized.
I'm actually going to read the 2 paragraphs that I didn't have time to read in my closing today. And historically, this has been on our radar for decades. In 1996, the legislature passed LB 299, which created the Task Force on Unfunded Mandates, who at that time identified and reviewed all programs and services enacted by the legislature, which resulted or may result in an increase in expenditures of funds by the political subdivisions assigned to perform or provide the programs and services. In 1994, Governor Ben Nelson created the Nebraska Mandate Initiative to help small municipal governments better cope with mandates. There was also a governor's summit on education mandates in 1995. This is crazy. If we're unwilling to address unfunded mandates or curb the state's use of them moving forward, we face leaving political subdivisions with even fewer funds available to address the costs we force them to incur. It's time, friends, to take a look at these issues and start breaking down what is necessary and what has value. And frankly, we should be revisiting a lot of our past laws and doing that right now. If these programs have value, then the state should consider how they fund the programs. And we need to quit kicking this particular can down the road. I have researched, obviously, and worked on this for years. And I knew that I could never bring forward a bill because we've never been able to get support for this. And people get off on the weeds in the discussion and they don't see how it can work. But we have an opportunity here today. There's very little language that needs to be tweaked. We can change and be specific on the subdivisions and appease Senator Albright. We can tweak the language that Senator Hilgers is concerned about. There's some negotiating I think I need to do with Senator Friesen, and I'm willing to do the hard work. But friends, this is my priority bill. I didn't bring forward a whole bunch of bills this year. This is my most important bill. And I'm going to ask you to have faith that we can work together and make this bill better. Help me get it to select. And when I say I'm going to negotiate, I'm not just saying that on the mic and then I'm going to try and shove something down your throat on select, as we've seen happen before. I'm going to work with everybody and make it a better bill, make it a better constitutional amendment. And I'm going to pray that we can move it forward, because I believe in my heart that this is the first step to being more fiscally conservative and working more so as a team, which we've kind of gotten away from. We can do better. We are better than how we do business right now. And we can move this forward. How much time do I have left, Mr. President?
150.
And so I'm very pleased that many of you said, I like this idea, I think this is a good idea, but it needs to be tweaked. So knowing that, I'm giving you my promise, we're going to tweak it. For those of you that have said some random things as to why you can't address it, I really wish you'd give me the opportunity to address your concerns and see if we can fix it. And if not, don't vote for it and select. I know we've had a lot of people that we've done that solid for here on the floor before. So if it's a matter of like you like one senator more than the other, I guess I can respect that too. But I thought we were all here about good policy. If it's about party, I thought we were here about good policy. I'm just asking that you look, and there aren't a lot of moving parts. I'd like to correct that. There's like
1 minute.
literally a paragraph. One paragraph is what this constitutional amendment is. Not a lot of moving parts. It's going to require a small tweak to get everybody on board with their concerns. They're easy tweaks. And if everybody is legitimately saying that that's then when they're going to support it in select, I hope everybody stands by their words, because these are something we can fix. But I did take notes, and people who told me that if we could tweak it, they would vote it through out of general, they said today. And then if we fix it, they will vote it out of select. I have your names written down. I'm going to hold you to your promises as well. And with that, I would yield any time I have back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Walls, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Blood.
Senator Blood, 455.
I would ask that Senator Erdman yield to some questions.
Senator Erdman, would you yield?
Yes, I would.
Senator Erdman, you and I had a conversation earlier, because for you and I, this is like a head scratcher that people wouldn't support this. And the experience that we have, I think, really guides how we feel about this. Could you kind of address what you and I talked about on the mic?
Well, Senator Blood, the conversation that we had was the fact that we have these unfunded mandates, and going forward, what your bill does is prevent us from increasing those mandates. And we're not restricting them or taking away the mandates or the requirements they currently have. And I think it makes sense. And I think it also makes sense that the 49 of us, whoever they be, once this passes, will sit in this room and we'll decide how those things are implemented. And we'll try to go through all of those situations and scenarios that have been brought up and try to fix that. You have the same issue with your constitutional amendment that I have with mine. And we can fix that. We can figure out how to make that work. But sometimes we don't get the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Erdman, how long were you on the county board?
I served 12 years on the county board.
12 years. And I want to get this on record. The first time you looked at the budget, what was your impression?
Well, the first time when I reviewed the budget, I was taken back a bit by how many dollars we were spending to unfunded mandates like criminal justice and all of those things that the county is required to do. And I was puzzled by it, and I didn't realize that the taxpayers were paying that much of the burden.
And so during that time, when you tried to remedy it, when you brought it to people's attention, what was the demeanor usually with folks?
Can you repeat that?
So when you would bring it to people's attention and explain what your concern was, what were people's usual demeanors? Were they puzzled why they had to pay for it? Were they concerned that they had to pay for it?
Right, I understand. Well, the first time that I brought that up, it was just, the comment was, that's what happens. And that's what we have to deal with, because when the legislature is in session and they pass certain things and it's not funded by the state, it comes down to the county. So basically it was, you just have to deal with it. That's one of the things that we have to deal with as commissioners.
And did you find that frustrating?
I did.
And so for the people that come after you, do you think that a bill like this or a constitutional amendment like this might take away some of that frustration and let them be able to get down to doing better government because they have more money to actually spend?
I believe it will, and the main reason is it changes the focus from those who collect and spend the taxes to those who pay the taxes. Because just like when Senator Day's bill is going to come up, there's no fiscal note attached to it, but somebody's going to pay that. And when those kind of bills pass, we would have to make a decision, do we want to fund that or not? And so consequently now we don't make that decision because we know the taxpayer is going to pick up the bill.
And ultimately, if indeed we can move something like this forward, there's the potential for property taxes to go down because they no longer have to fund future unfunded mandates.
That's correct. In our case, when I was first elected, our mill levy was 49.85. And as our valuation increased, we would decrease the mill levy. And when I left office, it was 33 mills.
That's a good point. And so, friends, I want to get on record that Senator Erdman and I actually agree on something, because I don't think that happens a lot. A few times. He supported quite a few of my bills, actually, and I appreciate his friendship
1
and
minute.
his vote. Again, I'm looking to the senators who talked about this on the mic and said that should we make changes they'll support it in general. And if we change the language, they'll support it in select. For those senators that talked to me before this even came to the floor and told me they would support or voted out of committee to the floor, I ask for your continued support, and I question if you were not to support it. And I hope that you come and talk to me about that. But this is a good bill. I don't bring a lot of bills pertaining to the budget forward because I never really find things that are sustainable. I had circuit breaker bills that didn't get out of committee. I feel circuit breakers really have sustainability and it really helped those most in need. But that's not what we get to talk about today. What we get to talk about today is a constitutional amendment that allows Nebraskans to use their voices to say, you know what, we want you to not only be fiscally conservative, but we really
Time,
want you to
Senator.
review.
Thank you, Senator Blood and Senator Erdman. Members, Senator Breezy would like to introduce 22 seniors, 2 teachers, and a sponsor from Civic Nebraska to the Central Valley High School in Greeley, Nebraska. They are seated in the north balcony. Would you please stand to be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature? Returning to debate, Senator Erdman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, as we are visiting about the constitutional amendment that Senator Blood brought, and she said this is something that we talked about for a long time. She's exactly right. Several years, NACO had done an analysis of unfunded mandates, and I had a copy of that study, and I had given it to the governor. But I remember it was 4 counties, I believe: Scottsbluff, Hall, Douglas, and Lancaster County. And that document was about a couple hundred pages of all the unfunded mandates that are placed upon just the counties. Now, that didn't include the school, the NRD, the city, and all of those people, just on the counties. And it was it was an enormous amount of money if you figure up all the unfunded mandates. And Senator Blood had brought it to your attention that we've talked about this in the past. And we have talked about property tax relief for 54 years. And so I guess in the legislature, it takes a long time to make a change. And sometimes that is required because it's a significant change. But what she's asking for today is to discontinue increasing the amount of unfunded mandates. She's not asking us to remove and have the state pay for the things that are currently in place. That's not what she's asking for. And so I don't think it is a stretch to say that the 49 of us or the new 49 that'll be here next year would not be able to figure out how to write a statute that would protect all of those local units of government and also cure the problems that have been mentioned, like Senator Hilder's brought up about the bailiffs. We could do all that. That's not an impossibility, but what you have to do first of all is you have to figure out how to get this to the floor, how to get this to the ballot so that people can vote on it. And I would conclude that if this goes to the ballot, it'll pass, because I think everyone who pays property tax understands that these unfunded mandates make their property tax higher. And so we sometimes in this body don't want to give the people the choice or the opportunity to make a decision, but we call them the second house. But we seldom give them an opportunity to voice that authority or to vote on issues that affect them. And so that's exactly what Senator Blood is doing here today. And she made a comment about her and I don't often agree, but I will tell you this: when someone brings a bill that makes sense, irregardless of who they are, I vote for it. And today I'm standing up in support of 263CA because of that reason. And we sometimes don't make decisions like that in this body. It's a lot like junior high student council sometimes. If you didn't vote for my bill, I won't vote for your bill. That's not the way we make laws, or we shouldn't make laws like that here. What we should do is, does this bill make sense? Will it make people's lives better? And if it does, then we should vote for it. And I have voted for bills from Senator Moorfield. I voted for several bills for Senator Wayne, and he said don't use them all up yet. So I do support good legislation when it makes sense, and I will be supporting 263CA. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Members, Senator Arch would like to introduce 63 fourth graders from Trumbull Park Elementary in Papillion. They are seated in the north balcony. Would you please stand to be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature? Members, seeing no one in the queue, Senator Blood, you are recognized to close on LR 263CA.
Thank you, Mr. President. Friends, we've had good debate. And for those of you that were authentic and asking for help and asking me to change the language, we will be working on that between general and select. What you've brought forward are really quite easy fixes. And so for those of you that want changes and sincerely want to see a better bill, please come to me. If you don't believe I understood you clearly, I want to make sure that no voice is left behind. But meanwhile, the voices that I want to make sure that we do hear are the voices of Nebraskans when this gets placed on the ballot. This is a message, a unified message saying that we do care about how much money we spend in this body. We do care that we bring forward good policy with good bipartisan support. And we do care that you have a better state where you can live and raise your family. With that, I would ask for a call of the House. Roll call vote, reverse order.
Members, there has been a request for a call of the House. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
25 ayes, 4 nays to place the House under call.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senators, the House is under call. All unexcused members, please return to the chamber. Senator Geist, Senator McDonald, Senator Flood, Senator McKinney, Senator Wayne, Senator Lathrop, Senator Blood, we are short Senator Flood. Would you like to wait? We will. Senator Blood, Senator Flood's office is having trouble locating him. Would you still like to wait? All members are present. Members, the question is the advancement of LR 263CA to ENR initial. There's been a request for a roll call vote in reverse order. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Wishart, voting yes. Senator Williams, voting yes. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting yes. Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Stinner, voting yes. Senator Slama, voting yes. Senator Sanders, voting yes. Senator Pansing Brooks, voting yes. Senator Pauls, Senator Merman, voting yes. Senator Moser, voting no. Senator Morfeld, voting yes. Senator McKinney, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McAllister, voting yes. Senator Lowe, not voting. Senator Linehan, voting no. Senator Lindstrom, Senator Lathrop, voting yes. Senator Coulterman, Senator Jacobson, voting yes. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Hickelman, voting yes. Senator Hilgers, voting yes. Senator Matt Hanson, voting yes. Senator Ben Hanson, voting yes. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Gregert, voting yes. Senator Geist. Senator Geist? I know, Senator. How would you like to vote? Yes. I was a little quick on the trigger, forgive me. Senator Friesen, not voting. Senator Flood, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator Day, voting yes. Senator Clements, not voting. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Breesy, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Brandt, not voting. Senator Bostelman, not voting. Senator Bostar, voting yes. Senator Blood, voting yes. Senator Arch, voting yes. Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Aguilar, not voting. 34 ayes, 5 nays on the advancement.
LR 263CA advances. Raise the call. Mr. Clerk for items.
Mr. President, two new regular resolution, 381, Senator Merman, 382, Senator Gregg, those will both be laid over. That's all that I have.
We will continue with the agenda for the day. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, LB 852, it's a bill by Senator Day. It's a bill for an act relating to schools, provides for behavioral health points of contact, and provides duties to the State Department of Education's Division of Behavioral Health. Introduced on January 6th of this year, at that time referred to the Education Committee, advanced to general file. I have amendments to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Day, you're welcome to open on LB 852.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise today to introduce LB 852, which provides a process for parents and students to quickly access available behavioral health service providers in their community. We do not need to reinvent the wheel to get access to these resources, but simply utilize the geographic listing already kept and updated by the Nebraska Family Helpline currently housed at Boys Town and funded through the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm grateful to Senator Walz for making this her personal priority bill. As our schools are responding to the mental health needs of students, providing information for parents to determine who is available to provide treatment and counseling should not be an obstacle. LB 852 puts the system in place by having the schools identify the person in each school building who keeps the information, and can access it for parents. The Department of Education, working with the Department of Health and Human Services, can distribute the information to the schools by geographic area and keeps the information updated annually. In this bill, we do not require the school personnel to have any specific training, but rather identify who is the mental health point of contact so they can best serve parents and students. We establish a deadline of August 1st, 2023 for the designation of points of contact around the state by school districts. If services are available during the school day at the school, the point of contact will help facilitate that process. We were experiencing a youth mental health crisis prior to COVID, but we know the pandemic has greatly exacerbated this issue. These are difficult times for our students, and I believe that LB 852 is one of the simplest ways we can provide better access to mental behavioral health care to students. I will add that this bill came out of committee unanimously 8-0 with no opposition testimony. And with that, I would encourage your green vote on LB 852.
Thank you, Senator Day. You may proceed to the committee amendment. Senator Walz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. AM 1607 strikes whenever possible on page 2, line 20 of the bill, thus making the facilitation of access to services during the school day at the school the student attends mandatory. I encourage your green vote on the amendment and the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Walz. Debate is now open, and Senator Bosselman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. Per se, I don't have any issues with Senator Day's bill or the amendment. I think they're fine. I do believe our schools, in my district, several schools are already doing this. I think we passed the bill a couple of years ago, allow private insurance to come in and provide some services for mental health to where they can provide those services. And some schools are doing it in the school already itself. So, making this awareness out there, the schools are supportive of that, and I don't have a disagreement with that. I want to talk about something completely different that I guess I was oblivious to for some time that came to my attention this weekend, and many people I've talked to already know about this. It's something that kind of took me back just a little bit, and I'm a little shocked, I guess is what I would put it. It's called something called furries. If you don't know what furries are, it's where school children dress up as animals, cats or dogs, during the school day. They meow and they bark, and they interact with their school, with the teachers and that in this fashion. And now schools are wanting to put litter boxes in the schools for these children to use. How is this sanitary? I'm going to have a discussion with CEO Smith about this. This is something I think, how can schools allow this to happen? I think it's very disruptive within the school system. I think it's very disruptive within the classes. I even heard from one person here recently said that a student identified as a cat and wanted a litter box. And the school didn't provide the litter box, so the student went ahead and defecated on the floor. Really? Really? School administrators, what is going on? Nebraska Department of Education, what is going on? State Board of Education, what is going on? If some kids can't wear American flag to walk through the school on their shirt, and you keep them out of school, and you kick them out of school, but it's okay if they wear a cat costume, you have a litter box for them, and that's fine? I don't think so. So perhaps, Senator Day, you're on a bigger issue here than what people are thinking of. There are some issues there, but the other question I have is, where are the parents? There are some problems in our schools. Those need to be taken care of. Administrators and others need to pay attention, better listen up, because I think there's going to be some legislation coming really soon to start addressing a lot of these things if you don't address it yourself. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Erdman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I see this amendment strikes. I think it strikes whenever possible, however possible. Senator Day, you yield to a question?
Senator Day, will you yield?
Yes, I will.
Senator Day, can you explain, is that this amendment, is this the one that strikes whenever possible?
Yes, L7 strikes whenever possible.
Okay, and what's your thought process? Why was that amendment included?
To ensure that every school building in the state has a point of contact.
So whenever possible, if my district doesn't have that, then they're exempt from having these requirements?
Essentially, yes, but we wanted to make sure that that was not the case.
Okay, how do you make sure that that's not the case? I mean, if it gives them an exemption, if it says
But
whenever
that's
possible.
that's why we're striking whenever possible.
Okay, so they're making sure that they always have those.
Correct.
Okay.
Or the ESUs are another option, especially in rural areas.
So what is the penalty if they don't?
There is no penalty.
So then how do you enforce that?
We ask the schools to do this just like we would anything else. There's no other penalties for the other things that we're asking schools to do.
All right, so if a school chooses or can't meet this requirement, then what happens?
You know, Senator Erdman, I'm not really sure what the process would be at that point.
Okay. And I just curious. I don't know if my schools provide this. I'm pretty sure they probably do, but I'm just wondering if we're putting a restriction or an obligation on the schools that don't have this opportunity. That's my concern. So we'll listen to the discussion and see if my questions get answered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Day. Senator Ben Hansen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was hoping Senator Day would yield to a couple of questions, please.
Senator Day, will you yield?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, by the way, for answering questions. Just a couple thoughts on section 1 on that last sentence. Each behavioral health point of contact shall have knowledge of community behavioral health service providers and other resources available for students and families. Do you have any examples of what other resources might be available for students and families?
I am not sure exactly what other resources would pertain to.
Okay. Just curious because I'm trying to figure out who determines,
Well,
if it's too broad or who determines what other
Nebraska
resources.
Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services are the ones that would have the list of providers in addition to the Nebraska Helpline at Boys Town.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. And the registry of the local behavioral health providers, is that also what DHHS will provide that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it's more about, on section 3, that the point of contact shall coordinate access to community behavioral health services for students and families and facilitate access to services during the school day at the school, and the student attends whenever possible. Now, what my question was about the facilitate access part. Does that mean, would we be providing transportation, or would they be coming to the school? I'm trying to figure out what that means, or just,
This bill doesn't require any kind of transportation or anything like that. The idea is just designating a point of contact and helping facilitate that. This is not, we're not requiring the schools to do anything outside of saying, these people need resources, who has the list of resources? Let's make sure that they have
okay.
access to that.
And I actually, I don't think I'm really even opposed to the bill. I'm just trying to kind of work out some of these questions that I wouldn't say would have unintended consequences, but that might come up later. And if somebody, and you have it here in the last sentence on section 3, such facilitation shall be approved by the student's parent or guardian. And so if the parent or guardian denies that, does anything happen, or is they have to fill out a form, or just say, look, we're going to deny? Like the point of contact says, look, we feel like this student would be better served going to this behavioral health specialist. The parent says, no, we do not want them going to that. How does that, do you know how that would happen? Do you have anything in your mind, like would they fill out a form or something, or?
Well, the age of majority for mental and behavioral health services is 18 in Nebraska. So there can be no services provided or services facilitated without the parental consent.
Yes, and so that I get that part, but then what happens after the parent says, I don't want my kid going to behavioral health specialist? Like, would the school have to report that? Would they say anything?
No.
Okay, just want to make sure, like, if there's no repercussions for the student or the parent
Right.
for that.
Correct.
So, okay,
Yes.
well, thank you. I appreciate you answering my questions. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Day. Seeing no one left in the queue, Senator Walls, you are welcome to close on the committee amendment. Senator Walls waives close. Question before the body is the adoption of AM 1602 LB 852. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Have you all voted? Mr. Clerk, record.
33 ayes, 2 nays, Mr. President, on the committee amendments.
AM 1607 is adopted. Mr. Clerk, for the next amendment.
Mr. President, Senator Day, by rule, yours is the next amendment, AM 2563.
Senator Day, you are welcome to open on your amendment.
Sorry, I got it right here. Thank you, Mr. President. AM 2563 makes a small but important change to this bill. In the green copy, we specify that the required behavioral point of contact may be an administrator, a school nurse, a school psychologist, or another designated school employee. What we have recently learned is that in some cases, especially in rural schools, the most logical and qualified person at the school to assign these responsibilities to, or that is already doing the work, is actually a contracted worker at the school. Most generally, this person is an employee of an ESU that works full or part-time at the school. In order to allow these contracted persons to be able to serve as a behavioral point of contact, we are changing school employee to person affiliated with such school building or other division. This simple but substantive change keeps with the spirit of the bill but provides greater flexibility to local school districts. I encourage your green vote on this amendment and the underlying bill, LB 852. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Day. Debate is now open on AM 2563. Senator Erdman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I listened to Senator Day's comments there on the opening on this amendment. It sounds like that these schools are already doing this. I'm concerned, or I'm confused maybe, as to why we need a bill to continue what they're already doing. Maybe if I ask Senator Day a question, she could explain that.
Senator Day, will you yield?
Yes, I will.
Senator Day, did you hear my comments?
I did.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Senator Erdman. There are many schools in the state already doing this, and they already have a designated point of contact. But there are some schools that do not. This is a bill that we've been working on for years. It is a necessary change so that we can ensure that there was someone in every school building to help facilitate the connection between students and parents and outside resources in the community.
Okay. So is that a large number of schools you think that don't do anything, that are failing in this regard?
I wouldn't say it's a large number, but it's significant enough that we felt like we needed to bring a bill to ensure that there is somebody in every building.
Okay. So who brought you this idea? The department?
This was actually a bill that was previously Senator Wall's bill a few years back.
And it didn't go anywhere? Is that why you're bringing it back now?
That's correct.
Okay. So what happens if we don't do this bill?
Kids are not going to have the best possible chance of getting access to behavioral and mental health services.
Okay. Do you think this bill is more necessary now because of the implications or the results of COVID being masked and dismissed from school and social distancing and all of those issues?
I do believe that the need is much greater now because of the pandemic, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Day. Senator Jacobson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I want to follow up on the comments of Senator Erdman. I've got some of the same concerns. I guess my question is, I do see the problem. This is a significant problem across the state, and behavioral health is something we've got to continue to be focused on. I'm a little concerned about how this impacts the school, and particularly whether we're really talking about potentially an unfunded mandate here too, or whether what the flexibility is at the school level. What are we actually going to accomplish? And maybe I could ask Senator Day if you would mind yielding to a question.
Senator Day, will you yield?
Yes, I will.
I guess my question would be if you could just elaborate a little bit more. I know I've spoken with my local school district in North Platte. I think they see some value. I think they have some questions about costs associated with this. Can you explain how this works? Is this a recommendation? Is this a requirement? And then how would that be funded?
So, yes, thank you, Senator Jacobson. I appreciate your question. So the only thing that this bill does is we're not requiring them to hire any new staff. We are just asking schools to say, this is the person in the building with all of the contact information and the list of resources that is relevant to the geographic area if a student or family were to need behavioral or mental health services. And so we're just facilitating the connection between students, parents, and resources in the community outside the school for these services.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I would intend to vote green based upon that response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Day. Senator Linehan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to get up for a second here and say I'm in full support of the amendment and the underlying bill. This is something that we've actually, it seems pretty simple, but I think we've been with Senator Walls, we've been working on it for 3 or 4 years. This is so if a provider needs to talk to the school, they call the school and the school knows who to send the call to. Because yes, some schools are set up where they've got it covered, but this is in every building too. So just to make sure that there's somebody to answer the phone if a provider needs to talk to them in the school. So I'd appreciate your support for both. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Seeing no one left in the queue, Senator Day, you're welcome to close on AM 2563. Senator Day waives close. The question before the body is the adoption of AM 2563 to LB 852. All those in favor vote aye, opposed nay. Has everyone voted? Mr. Clerk, please record.
34 ayes, no nays on adoption of Senator Day's amendment.
AM 2563 is adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Senator Morfeld would move to amend AM 2272.
Senator Morfeld, you are welcome to open on AM 2272.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today I bring AM 2272 to LB 852, which includes my LB 912, a bill that adds mental health aid first training for school personnel to programs covered in part by lottery funds. This would be a voluntary program that would be made available to any teachers, administrators, or support staff that would be able to help gain knowledge to help recognize the signs and symptoms of mental illness and substance use disorders, including opioids and alcohol, information on local resources and services to share with students and parents and others who may be experiencing a mental health or substance abuse challenge, and also techniques to safely de-escalate crisis situations and how to refer a student and their parent to services if these students are identified as somebody who needs maybe a little additional help. I want to thank the committee for working with me on this, particularly Senator Linehan and Senator Merman. Both had suggestions which are incorporated into the amendment, one of which is that any referral must be approved by the parent so that there is parental control and guidance in this. And then in addition, we took out some of the other conditions that are sometimes tougher to identify unless you're a trained professional, like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Otherwise, the bill came out with no votes, and I just want to thank the committee for working with me on this, and particularly Senator Linehan and Senator Merman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morfeld. Debate is now open on AM 2272. Senator Erdman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I wonder if Senator Morfield to yield a question or two.
Senator Morfeld, will you yield?
Yes.
Senator Morfield, did you say this is a voluntary program that people can sign up for?
Yep, it's a voluntary program that people can sign up for, but the training costs money, which is why we have to have a program or a little pool of money to be able to provide for that training. So it's not an unfunded mandate.
Okay, how much is that little pool of money?
So when we originally introduced it the last few years, I think we were taking about $250,000 to $500,000 from the lottery funds. This funding would actually come next year when the lottery funds are reallocated.
So you're taking the money from the lottery funds in?
Yep, the money will be taken from the lottery funds next year when those are reallocated.
And did you say $250,000?
Pardon me?
$250,000?
I believe it's based on a percentage of the lottery fund, so it's a moving target.
Okay.
So let me find out how much we did. That'll be up to the legislature next year on how to allocate how much.
Do you know how many trainers that might be? I mean,
Well, there's two different ways you can get training. One, the department would maybe be able to bring in a national trainer, or the better way would be to have the trainer, like a trainer in the state of Nebraska that would be able to provide that training. That'd also be cheaper.
would they have to be psychologists, or what kind of training would they have to have prior to taking this?
Yeah, almost all the trainers are trained mental health professionals. I don't know if it's psychologist or therapist level
Okay.
credential.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Morfeld. Senator Walls, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in support of LB 852, which is my personal priority, along with the support of AM 1607 and AM 2272. This is something that we've been working on for over 3 years, and I believe that now is the time to get this bill across the finish line. In 2019, I introduced LB 727, which was co-sponsored by Senator Linehan, Pansy Brooks, Wishart, and Hickelman. Thank you to these 4 senators for co-sponsoring this bill again with Senator Day. The hearing had proponent testimony representing Nebraska Association of School Boards, the Nebraska School Psychologists Association, the Educational Service Unit, Nebraska Council of School Administrators, Boys Town Children's Hospital, the Medical Center, and ACLU of Nebraska. There was no opponent testimony, and the bill advanced unanimously from committee. I believe this is a great bill with broad school support that makes common sense for Nebraska's children. We know that it is good for kids because we have seen the process work already. For example, Ralston Public Schools made the decision to implement a similar process 7 years ago. While they contract with an outside agency to provide resources for students, their model can be compared to the concepts found in Senator Day's LB 852. As a result of their efforts, Ralston Public Schools has been able to help many of the families and staff members work their way through a behavioral mental health crisis and feel those steps have made significant difference in the lives of their students and staff. Let's replicate those remarkable outcomes across the state, and please join me in voting green for AM 2563, AM 2272, AM 1607, and the underlying bill, LB 852. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Walls. Senator Jacobson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I guess I want to follow up on some of the questions that Senator Erdman had. And I would have a question again for Senator Moorfield as it relates to shifting of funds from the lottery funds. Obviously, we're having our discussions in here about ARPA, and there's a finite amount of money. And so if somebody wants to get some money, they got to take it from somebody. So I guess Senator Moorfield might, if he would be willing to yield.
Senator Moorfield, will you yield?
Yeah.
My question would be, can you tell me a little more precisely, where would you be looking, or would you, I'm trying to figure out where the money would come from the lottery funds to, who would we take it from to shift it to fund this program?
Yeah, so I think it's about every 10 years, maybe every 5 years, the Education Committee reallocates all the lottery funds. Lottery funds, as you probably know, comes from the lottery, and constitutionally, a certain amount of it has to go through K through 12 and higher education per the Constitution. So right now, there are programs that will be sunsetting, particularly discretionary funding that the Department of Education gets to then redistribute out. So again, it's going to be up to this legislature next year, or the next legislature, I should say. But there's millions of dollars that are discretionary that right now goes to the Department of Education. They are in support of this legislation, so it would come out of that type of allocation, and then the percentages would be reallocated accordingly.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I am very concerned, as I know the rest of you are, about unfunded mandates, and also about we start reallocating dollars, and then suddenly somebody needs a general fund appropriation. So I think if we're going to contain it within the lottery, and even if those dollars would dip due to the other gambling that may be going on, I'm assuming the Department of Education would have to figure out how to allocate this and prioritize it. So I guess I'm inclined to support the bill, or support the amendment, and ultimately the bill based upon that. So thank you, Senator Moorfield.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Friesen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Moorfield yield to a question?
Senator Moorfield, will you yield?
Yes.
So on page 2, line 3, it talks about, most all of this will be approved by the parent or a guardian, except as in it states 43-2101. Could you explain in what circumstance would a parent or guardian not approve?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I'm going to double check this off the mic, because I remember looking at this statute a few weeks ago when we were doing this. But 43-2101, I believe, refers to if they don't have a parent or guardian, they're a ward of the state. But let me triple check that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Moorfield. Otherwise, I know it's going to be a reapportionment of money out of the lottery. Again, I think there may be a need for this. I'm still reading through the rest of the bill, so I'll reserve judgment on it yet. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Senator Ben Hansen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just read a certain section that I had some questions on, and so I have to admit I didn't ask Senator Moorfield beforehand what I was going to ask him. So I was hoping to get a yield to a couple of questions, please.
Senator Moorfield, will you yield?
Yes.
Thank you. On page 3, line 21, you start talking about the State Board of Education shall establish innovation grant programs. So unless I hope I didn't miss it, could you elaborate on that a little bit? I more had a question about not the mental health first aid, because that pertains to the bill we're talking about, but what's early literacy and quality instruction materials and personalized learning through digital education or other innovative areas identified by the board? What would that entail? What does that mean?
I think that's leftover legislation, actually, from a year or two ago. We may need to clean that up on Select. That's a good find. As you're reading through that, I think this was a part of a broader package a year or two ago. That's not the intent to have that in there.
Okay.
So I'm going to double check on that, make sure that I'm not missing something that was required language. But I believe that this is leftover language from a year or two ago when we first introduced it.
Well, thanks. We'll talk off the mic about it some more.
Well, let's talk off the mic, and I will take that out.
Cool. All right. Thank you. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Moorfeld? See no one left in the queue. Senator Moorfeld, you are welcome to close on AM 2272. Senator Moorfeld waives close. The question before the body is the adoption of AM 2272 to LB 852. All those in favor vote aye. Opposed, nay. Has everyone voted? Mr. Clerk, please record.
28 ayes, no nays on adoption of Senator Moorfeld's amendment.
AM 2272 is adopted. Seeing no other amendments, Senator Day, you're welcome to close on LB 852.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleagues for the discussion this morning. I am very excited about this bill. I did want to mention there was a recent study that was done titled America's Mental Health Report Card, and it was reported that Nebraska, I believe, was in the bottom 10, maybe even the bottom 5 states in the country in terms of providing students with adequate mental behavioral health services. And so I think there's a lot of room for us to improve in this area. And I think that this is one of the first small steps that we can make in helping to mitigate some of the issues that have become exacerbated by the pandemic in terms of youth mental behavioral health services. And with that, I would encourage your green vote on LB 852. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Day. The question is the advancement of LB 852 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, please record.
27 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the advancement of Legislative Bill 852.
LB 852 is advanced to ENR initial. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 1016, a bill by Senator Walls. It's a bill for an act relating to the Transportation Innovation Act, defines terms, provides for public-private partnerships, introduced on January 13, referred to the Education, or the Transportation Committee, excuse me. The bill was advanced to general file. There are committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Walls, you're welcome to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Today, I am very excited to introduce LB 1016. Last year, I brought LB 542, which was a bill that would allow the Department of Transportation, I'm trying to hurry because I know everybody wants to go to lunch, to bond to help speed up the construction and completion of Nebraska roads, highways, and bridges. This was a concern specifically for me because of the expressway system that was passed in the legislature in 1988. There is now 1/3 of that left of the system, and it's now on track to be finished in 2040, according to the department's most recent report. The expressway system was estimated to be complete by 2003 and would expand 600 miles of 2-lane traffic to 4-lane highways. In 2016, the Transportation Innovation Act, the legislature passed in statute that the expressway system would be completed by 2033, but now its completion date has been pushed back 7 more years. Over the summer, the governor's office and NDOT held listening sessions in key spots where the system is not, including in my district. Through these listening sessions, it became clear to me that pushing more money toward the department was not the best path forward. because the biggest obstacle NDT seems to have has been with the delivery of projects, the ability to complete studies, design, and construct. This brings me to LB 1016. Through research, I asked the question, how do other states complete projects so quickly? My office found that 32 other states allow in statute for public-private partnerships, or P3s. NDOT's legal counsel, who is an assistant attorney general, has interpreted our current statute as not enabling the department to enter into P3s. As I'm sure you know, we are a pay-as-you-go state, which seems like the fiscally responsible thing to do. But as we continue to see inflation, wages, and supply costs increase, we may not have the financial resources to continue down that path for every project. Through my office's work with the fiscal office, it's clear that interest payments are significantly less costly than what the state is paying in terms of inflation. For example, the initial projected cost of the expressway system was around $200 million. And now just to complete the final third of this project, it will cost upwards of $500 million, with the cost increasing every year. When the Transportation Innovation Act passed in 2016, it was my understanding that there were hearings across the state to see what Nebraskans needed most for transportation. That's where the goals, which we have listed in the statement of intent, came from. Seeing the goalposts for the expressway system move again, even from 2016, is very frustrating for all Nebraskans. We are trying to make sure that we can accomplish the goals set out in 2016 before the Transportation Innovation Act money sunsets in 2033. P3 contracts would provide us with a different delivery method of construction and completion. It would allow the state to partner with a contractor or a business contract for construction and completion of capital projects or services. Essentially, we are trying to lift the burden off the state needing the money in full at the time of the project construction, and instead working with a private contractor on the payment and completion of a project. The bill's intention is to have the private partner finance the project, and the state would make payments to the partner over a period of time. Let me just take a minute to walk you through the bill. First, it would enable the department to enter into contracts for construction and/or financing of current projects outlined under the Transportation Innovation Act. Secondly, we drafted the bill in a way to ensure that the contracting agency and DOT has oversight of the partner and ensures legislative oversight. Third, the bill asks the director of the Nebraska Department of Transportation to create and adopt rules and regulations that would need to be followed for these contracts. And last, the bill gives, fourth, it gives an outline of what needs to be included in the RFP, and that the public or the private partner must demonstrate to the contracting agency that they are able to perform any duty, responsibility, or function that it's authorized to perform. Finally, we make it clear that this is only for solicited proposals, so private partners can't approach the state with a project. I want to be clear, the state is not required to enter into these contracts. We are just giving the department another tool to complete projects. The Nebraska Department of Transportation has been working collaboratively with us on this bill and is in full support of P3s. Not only is this bill important for us to complete our current state's expressway system, it allows us to update our state's infrastructure. By allowing the department to enter into P3 contracts, we are creating safer bridges and highways for Nebraskans, speeding up project completion time, and helping to promote more commerce. We are also trying to ensure that the goals laid out in the Transportation Innovation Act are accomplished in our lifetimes. Chairman Friesen will be reviewing AM 2128, which does a few things, including removing the $100 million cap and the reference to the State Highway Commission. The amendment also includes enabling language for the NDOT to utilize progressive design build project delivery. This came out of committee with an 8-0 vote. It has support from the Nebraska Department of Transportation, the League of Municipalities, and the City of Norfolk. The department sees this as something necessary they need to help Nebraska prepare for the 21st century transportation system. Additionally, this bill would help the NDOT to work with broadband partners, prepare for expanded electric vehicle charger installation, and much more. I ask for your green vote on LB 1016 and AM 2128. Thank you, Mr. President.
Before we continue debate, Senator Flood would like to recognize 50 members from the 5th grade in Norfolk Middle School in Norfolk, Nebraska, seated in the north balcony. Students, please rise, be welcomed by your Nebraska Legislature. Mr. Clerk, for a committee amendment.
Transportation Committee chaired by Senator Friesen offers committee amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Friesen, you're welcome to open.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Walls, for introducing LB 1016 this year. The Transportation Telecommunications Committee held a public hearing on LB 1016 on January 31 and advanced the bill on an 8-0 vote of the committee. The amendment substitutes for and replaces the bill as introduced. The introduced copy of the bill is retained with the following changes. The term progressive design build is added and defined as a project delivery process in which both the design and construction of a project are procured from a single entity that is selected through a qualifications-based selection process, the earliest possible stage of a project. It provides that pursuant to the Transportation Innovation Act, the Department of Transportation may utilize the progressive design build contracting process in addition to the design build or construction manager general contractor method of project delivery. The following provisions are eliminated from the bill. It removes the requirement that requests for public-private partnerships be provided to the State Highway Commission. It removes the requirement that public-private partnership projects be approved by the legislature. And it removes the requirement that State Highway Commission shall review and approve a public-private partnership entered into by the Department of Transportation. I would ask your support of the committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Mr. Clerk, for an amendment.
Mr. President, Senator Bostelman would move to amend committee amendments 2239.
Senator Bostelman, you are welcome to open on 2239.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be quick. AM 2239 was brought because of a discussion I've had with Associated General Contractors, and this amendment was agreed by all parties involved with this bill. AM 2239 strengthens the criteria when selecting contractors for progressive design build contracts by including past costs and expenses of a firm when bidding and completing projects. What this does is allow our smaller firms that may have a smaller resume and less resource availability, but they may have a much better record on cost competitiveness. AM 2239 ensures that the state takes into account the past costs and expenses of firms bidding on contracts and ensures our smaller firms have a seat at the table. I want to thank Senator Walls for allowing me to introduce this amendment. I urge a green vote on AM 2239, AM 2128, and LB 1016. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bostelman. Debate is now open. See no one in the queue. Question before the body is the adoption of AM 2239. Senator Bostelman waves close. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Has everyone voted? Mr. Clerk, please record.
Thirty-one ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of Senator Bostelman's amendment to the committee amendments.
AM 2239 is adopted. Next question before the body is AM 2128. Senator Friesen, you're welcome to close. Senator Friesen waves close. Question is the adoption of AM 2128 to LB 1016. All those in favor vote aye. Opposed, nay. Has everyone voted? Mr. Clerk, please record.
31 ayes, no nays on adoption of committee amendments.
AM 2128 is adopted. Senator Walls, you're welcome to close on LB 1016. Senator Walls waves close. The question is the advancement of LB 1016 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Has everyone voted? Mr. Clerk, please record.
31 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
LB 1016 advances. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. President, some items, LR 383, a study resolution by Senator Erdman. Enrollment and review reports LB 519, 741, and 917 is correctly engrossed. Mr. President, Senator Hickelman would move to recess the body until 1 o'clock p.m.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We are recessed to 1 o'clock.